folks, hope everybody's doing all right. So as I've said in one of my previous videos, I've spent the past 4 to 4.5 weeks recovering from an illness. Now, that experience led me to the subject of this video. And the subject is prepping to be your own doctor. So let me tell you my story. Not that it's that interesting, but it does kind of set the tone for the video. I got sick with a pretty bad case of the flu. I think I caught it from somebody at work. I'm not sure. It really doesn't matter. But that flu developed into a very severe upper respiratory infection. And that drug out for a couple of weeks. And I started to feel a little bit better, but I was having to work through this illness. And where I work now, I work in a building, so I'm not completely exposed to the elements, but there is no heat, there's no air conditioner for in the summer. We have bay doors open all the time, so I'm exposed to kind of the really cold air coming in, and sometimes even rain blowing in through the doors. So I'm kind of exposed partially to the elements through my job. And with everybody around me being sick, I got sick too. I started to feel a little bit better, and then I got sick again, so I had a relapse. Now, I had gone to the doctor, and the doctor had prescribed me a bunch of medication, including steroids, cough syrup, and what have you. I burned through that in about a week. That's about all that he had prescribed to me, was about a week's worth of medication. And it hadn't done anything for me. I wasn't any better. I wasn't feeling any better. There was no progress in recovery from that illness. Okay, that upper respiratory infection also developed at about that time into a very severe sinus infection. And I'm talking about infection in blood. So at that point, rather than go back to the doctor for more of the same medication that obviously hadn't worked, I decided to self-medicate. Now, I used a combination of a variety of over-the-counter medications, some multi-symptom severe cold and flu, like NyQuil at night. I would take that at night. I was taking Benadryl to help me sleep because I couldn't take anything else at the time. During the day, I was taking the multi-symptom cold and flu capsules for daytime use. I was also using some herbal medicines to try to compensate for other things. I couldn't hardly breathe. I was coughing constantly. My stamina was just gone. So I had resorted to drinking some herbal tea, some mullein tea, and some other things. So through a variety of over-the-counter medications and herbal remedies, I finally kicked it. It took a little while, but I finally kicked it. At one point, I believe I even took some antibiotics for the sinus infection because it was so bad. But my whole point is that I went to the doctor, and what they gave me wasn't sufficient to kick what I had. And at the point that I'd gotten to, I couldn't afford another trip to the doctor. The copay plus the medication that didn't even work was just too much. So that's why I chose to self-medicate, and ended up the self-medication worked better than what I got from the doctor. So that's the story that I just spent the past month or so going through. If we look at the past, we've seen that over the past few years, people were trying to force certain medications or vaccinations or whatever on people in disregard of their freedom of personal choice. People were denied care at medical facilities by doctors if you didn't have the jab that they demanded you have. you were denied services, freedoms were denied unless you complied. In the future, we're looking at the potential for a repeat of that. It's been said a couple of times on the news and in speeches by Biden that there will be another pandemic. And if you want to be realistic, there will always be another pandemic at some point in the future, but the way they're using this wording implies that it will be much sooner than you would expect, and does raise some questions as to possibly another planned pandemic. And this video might get demonetized simply for saying all of that. I don't really care. We've also seen that the WHO has come out and basically declared themselves the final authority of any global pandemic or crisis, medical crisis that happens worldwide. So they're automatically assuming authority over any other country by that. We're seeing more variants of assorted respiratory viruses, RSV. You've got variants of COVID, new variants of flu. There's just a variety of stuff out there. And it seems right now, at my job and everybody I've talked to, everybody's getting sick, and it's all really bad stuff. So there's a lot going around. There's a lot of people getting sick, and that's causing some concern. We're also seeing a rise in antibiotic-resistant bacteria, which can lead to various illnesses and making it more difficult to treat those illnesses because the antibiotics we typically use, that bacteria is resistant to those, that antibiotic is not having the same effect that it used to have. And we don't have any new antibiotics or new medications to treat these resistant bacteria with. Then you've got the rising cost of medical care, the potential economic concerns that impact the ability to afford a doctor. For example, medical care is continuing to go up. Treatment is getting more and more expensive. Insurance itself, if you have insurance through your job, is continuing to get more and more expensive. And then you've got people that are already struggling to make ends meet because of inflation, and then they're facing the rising cost of medical care. They may not be able to afford to go to the doctor. They may not, even if they can go to the doctor, they might not be able to afford the medication. Or there's the potential there for some sort of event in the future where medical care will be denied to anybody who doesn't meet a certain set of standards. And I think y'all know where I'm going with that. Or the fact that medical care just won't be available, period. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. We can only speculate. But all of those are concerns that we have to look at as far as looking forward into the future. So to that end, I feel that it's necessary, very necessary, even critical, that everyone be prepared to be their own doctor, to provide their own medical care, at least to an extent. Whether it's a minor illness or injury or something that could last much, much longer, you need to be able to provide at least basic care, support, and treatment through those. Possibly for a long period of time. Obviously, there's going to be some injuries or illnesses that prevent you from being able to treat yourself. So you'll need somebody to be able to treat you for you, take care of you for yourself, since you won't be able to do it yourself. For that reason, that just reinforces the importance of having a group or a network or some people that you can rely on. It's another example of this lone wolf scenario not being effective or realistic at all. It just doesn't work in reality, folks. There are very few situations in which one person can survive alone without any assistance or any outside resources for years on end. I mean, it has happened. Technically, it can be done, but there are a lot of challenges in that, and the odds are simply just against it happening, particularly on any wide-scale level. And even so, with that, it's so much easier and so much better if you have a network of people that you can call on if you need assistance. People that can look after you if you're down with something serious, either an injury or illness. They can help you. They can help fix meals for you. They can help prepare medication for you, what have you. There's just a lot of reasons why having friends, having family, having a group that you can rely on is very important. Another thing is that there's obviously going to be some conditions, either illnesses or emergencies or injuries where you simply won't have the knowledge, the skill, or the training, or even the equipment and supplies to effectively deal with that situation. Even on the battlefield, you know, the standard is stabilize and then transport to somebody or to an area where they have more skill, more training, and more supplies to deal with it. Because there's a limit as to what you can do in the field. I see a lot of preppers, they stock things like surgical kits. They stock things like staples and staplers, medical staplers. They stock up on sutures and suture materials. All of that's that's all well and good, but if you don't have the proper training to use those, that could potentially cause more harm than good. And I understand that there's the mentality there that, well, I want to have this on hand in case I have somebody in my group or I come across somebody that has the necessary training to use them. And that's a perfectly reasonable thought process. However, even in that situation, there's going to be things that you can't deal with. You're not going to be performing open heart surgery or bypasses or things like that in a grid down SHTF. There are certain trauma cases that simply can't be done on the field or on a kitchen table or what have you in a grid down situation. So you need to understand that it's good to be able to provide medical care. It's good to be more reliant on yourself to an extent, but there are going to be some situations where you're simply not going to be able to deal with it, and you need to be realistic about what you can and cannot deal with. So in addition to that, you need to be able to perform basic first aid, and I'm talking about minor things. And then you've got the next level, which would be first responder training, at least in my area, where you deal with slightly more serious injuries or illnesses. There are classes available to help you get that training, and they're usually either free or they're not very expensive. The next step beyond that would be getting something like EMT or paramedic training. You can do that. There is a cost associated with that. And that may or may not be an option to you, but if you have the option and can afford it, I would highly recommend doing that. Understand, though, that being a paramedic or even an EMT basic or intermediate or whatever ranking system that your state goes by, you're not going to be trained to handle everything because there's a limit to what those skill sets and that training can provide. But those classes are available to you if you want to take advantage of them. And when and where possible, I would highly advise you do that. You never know when that might come in handy. And I'm speaking from someone with experience because I've I've been a first responder through a fire department. I've been an EMT. I've seen instances where I've treated people with herbal medicine. I've seen cases where I've advised on over-the-counter medication. Not that I'm a doctor or anything like that, but I've made recommendations based on my experience. I've seen situations where I've had to perform CPR. Or I've had to stabilize patients on the way to the emergency room. So I've been in a lot of those situations. So I am speaking from some level of experience here. There are a lot of things that you can prepare for, a lot of things that you can be ready to deal with, but you need to understand that there's a lot that it's just going to be out of your wheelhouse. Unless you are something like a nurse practitioner, a physician's assistant, a doctor, or something like that, there's going to be things that you're just not qualified or capable of dealing with. All right, so the next thing that I wanted to cover was stocking up on meds. And for this, I'm talking about OTC meds primarily. And this is going to be a separate video in and of itself, simply because if I go down the list of this will be like a 40-50 minute video, and I'm trying to keep it short. So I'll do a completely separate video on on meds to stock up on. But you need to stock up on OTC meds, and a variety of them. And if you have children in the house that you're going to be taking care of, you need to make sure that you keep children's medications stocked up as well, because children's doses are much different in many cases than adult doses. So what an adult can take, a child may not be able to, or it may be too much for the child. So just understand, there's different medications for adults and children for a reason, and you need to stock up both accordingly. If you own any kind of long-term medications, maintenance medications that are prescribed by your doctor, you need to stock up on those as well. I understand that it's difficult to do in some cases. My mom was on morphine and a lot of other very strong painkillers after she had her amputations. It was next to impossible to build up a supply of those for emergencies. And quite often her insurance wouldn't pay for more than a week or two at a time. Sometimes they would pay for a month, sometimes it'd be only a week or two. It all depended on the medication and the strength of that medication and what she was already on in conjunction with that. But anyway, if you have any kind of medications like that, you need to talk to your doctor, explain that your concerns are you might not be able to get to a pharmacy for a week or two if you're going out of town, or if there's concern about some civil unrest. Just be honest with your doctor, talk to them. And in a lot of cases, if it's like blood pressure medication or something like that, or even if you have diabetes and you're looking for a supply of that, the doctor may be able to help you with that. But if it's a controlled narcotic, that's going to be more of a challenge. So look into that. There are a lot of people that talk about stocking up, and I'll cover this again in the next video, talking about stocking up on antibiotics. There's a couple of ways you can do this. There are the fish antibiotics, which, depending on who you talk to, some people are for it, some people are against it. And I'm not going to get into the debate on that, but there is that option. You have to make up your mind for yourself if you want to take that chance. And you need to research it thoroughly before you make that decision. You need to make a very informed decision on that. That being said, there are other companies out there that provide certain medications, including antibiotics, to people for long-term scenarios. Jace Case is one of the ones that comes to mind right off the bat. Although I think there's a couple of other companies. Now, you can call the doctor. You'll get on a consultation with them, either on the phone or on the internet. And they'll go over your medical history. They'll go over what you need, what's in the case or whatever. And they'll write you a prescription for it. The drawback to it is the Jace Case is fairly expensive. if I remember right. It's somewhere around the $300 mark. But it's doctor-prescribed medications. If they're, so that those people that have concerns about using fish antibiotics and stuff like that, this could alleviate that concern. But not everybody has $300 to throw out on one of these. And your insurance may or may not cover it, so you need to look into that as well. Something else that I wanted to touch on, and I need to kind of hurry through this because I'm already at the 20-minute mark. Add medical books to your library. In addition to any kind of training that you get, medical books in your prepper library are critical. I've gone over several. I've got several on my bookcase back here. These orange ones right here are actually my EMT books from when I went to school. I've got some paramedic books. I've got family first aid, emergency medical procedures. I've got a lot of different books. I've got the pill book, where it gives you descriptions of the pills, what's in them, and what they're used for, so that you can, if you have pills in your hand, you can look at those pills, look in the book, you can identify those pills and what they're for. I've got another book about prescription drugs right there. I've got books on herbology, herbs for medical use, things like that. But I've also got things like, there's actually 3 books that I recommend. The first being the Prepper's Medical Handbook by William W. Forgey. The next is the Prepper's Guide to Surviving Pandemics, Bioterrorism, and Infectious Disease, also by William W. Forgey. The Survival Medicine Handbook, The Essential Guide for When Help is Not on the Way by Joseph Alton. They also have another book called the Survival Medicine Handbook for Emergencies and Disasters. It's a slightly different variation of this book. Those links to Amazon will be down in the description below, so you can look at those. Those are just 4 books that I highly recommend. There are many, many more books out there, but I highly recommend getting those books. Also, something to think about is several times I've gone to the local thrift store, which is a Goodwill. I've gone to the flea markets. I'm a big fan of thrift stores, by the way. And I've found nurse's medical desk reference, doctor's desk reference, even drug reference books at the thrift store for next to nothing. I've also seen many of these textbooks. I paid over $400 for these textbooks back here when I was in school. I've seen those from paramedic school, nursing school, what have you, in the thrift store for $15, $20 or less. So I would highly recommend that if this is something that you're interested in preparing for, go to the thrift store, look at these books, see if you can find some of these books, some of these desk references, some of these pill guides, what have you, and add them to your library. You know, even doctors, there's nothing wrong with adding books to your reference library. Even doctors use desk references when they're looking up treatments for cases. One of the things that I almost forgot to mention is that when I was on medication from the doctor, one of the meds I was on was a steroid, and because I was on that steroid, I couldn't take any Advil, I couldn't take any ibuprofen at all. Advil, Motrin, whatever. I couldn't take any Tylenol. So that left me, the only thing that I could take was aspirin. And I wasn't even certain, based on my knowledge, I wasn't even sure if it was safe to take Aleve, naproxen sodium, because there was the potential there for an interaction. So if you're ever on a medication, you need to understand what drugs you can and can't take along with that, whether they're prescription drugs or over the counter. That also goes for the herbalism. There's a lot of herbs that you can't take when you're on certain drugs. And while I'm on the subject, one thing that you might want to start doing some research on, learning about, is treating illnesses and general health with herbology. taking it back to nature, getting back to nature. I know there's a lot of people that believe very fervently in this, and then there's a lot of people that think it's a bunch of hogwash. A lot of our modern medicines come from, originated with herbology, so herbalism. So in the event that you can't get certain medications, there might be herbs and medicinals out there that you can use in place of those. All right, so that's all I'm going to cover in this video. In the next video, I'm going to go over a more detailed list of the OTC meds that I believe you need to stock up on, including reasons why you need to stock up on certain ones. But for now, that's all I've got. I appreciate you guys watching. Like, share, subscribe if you haven't. As always, take care, stay safe, keep prepping, don't get complacent, and be prepared for when you have to take care of yourself. That's the whole point of all of this, right? Is being prepared to take care of ourselves, whether we have access to medical care, whether we have access to a job for income, or whether we have access to the grid for electricity and water. We need to be able to build these systems of support for ourselves so we're not reliant on a much larger grid that could potentially go down or be denied us because of our political views. So with that, that's all I've got, folks. I appreciate you watching, and until next time, folks, I'll catch you later.